6:33. Let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everybody. My name is Carrie Wimberly. I'm the Executive Director of the Addiction Prevention Coalition, and we're so glad that you guys have joined us tonight. This is part of a series, Why Won't They Stop? And we've had amazing partners that have taken one training a piece, and we started in January and then we're ending up in September. So it's been an amazing journey, and every one of the presentations have been remarkable, and we've had great feedback, and it's been like a conversation. You guys have been so positive and encouraging, and we appreciate that. And so we're thinking about doing it next year again. So you guys keep telling us what you want, need, what you topics you're interested in, and we will certainly get that on the schedule. But tonight we are honored to have Not One More Alabama represented. Patty, okay, say your last name.
That's Sixtus.
I told her I say it different every time.
Like, think of like Sixtus.
Sixtus. Okay. And Patty is the director at Not One More Alabama. And not only that, but she has become a very dear friend of mine. And we love doing this work together and encouraging each other and learning from each other. And so she's joining us tonight from the beach, everybody.
From the beach.
So what dedication she has to do this. But she's going to be sharing with us the invitation to change approach, which is related to craft. So excited about this topic. I've learned more about craft this year, and we've been talking about it in our family group. So really, really excited about the topic. And again, I'm going to turn it over. I'm going to watch the Q&A box, and we'll ask questions along the way. But she's got a great presentation, and she's going to introduce Sabrina here, and I'm going to shut off my camera and my microphone and turn it over to you, Patty.
All right. Can everybody hear me okay? Carrie, you guys good? All right.
Great.
All right, so we'll get started here with our presentation for the evening. And first and foremost, I wanted to introduce Sabrina Wilburn. Sabrina Wilburn is one of the board members from Not One More Alabama, and she is also a parent coach with Not One More Alabama, as well as for the Partnership to End Addiction, the national nonprofit. And so Sabrina and I will be presenting this information together this evening. She is the basically runs our family support group. And so this has become an area that she has spent a lot of time working in and getting to know, and she'll be a wealth of information tonight as well. So Sabrina, thank you for joining me tonight and for joining everybody that's on here tonight.
Absolutely. I'm glad to be here, and thank you for everybody that's joining us tonight.
We really appreciate, we appreciate everybody being here tonight. I am coming from the beach, so I'm kind of improvising on my technology here today. So hopefully everything works out the way that I have planned and anticipated. But if it doesn't, we'll figure it out and make it work as we go along. So my name is Patty Sixtus. I'm the president of Not One More Alabama. And just for those that aren't familiar, Not One More Alabama is a nonprofit organization based mostly out of Huntsville, the North Alabama area. And we provide education, support, and just really hope and inspiration to people that have been impacted by addiction. So we serve lots of different groups of people, but we, just basically out there trying to help spread the word, share information, reduce stigma, increase awareness, advocate for people, and just keep getting it out there. So today we're going to share with you guys some information about the invitation to change approach, and we are the slides that you're going to be looking at today, just so that you understand why you're seeing these slides, are from the Center for Motivation and Change. The Center for Motivation and Change is an organization based out of New York, and they provide both treatment for substance use disorders, as well as they have a foundation that provides education and programming to support families of people who are impacted by addiction. So they have been gracious enough to provide us with some materials to help present this information tonight. So we're really grateful for them for that. So you will see their name and their information, their reference material throughout this presentation. So I wanted you to understand why, but also explain our connection to them. And our connection to them is that both Sabrina and I, along with a number of other people, are trained parent coaches. And we were trained through Partnership to End Addiction. Again, the national nonprofit. They used to be the Partnership for Drug Free. They've been around for many, many years. They merged about 2 or 3 years ago with the Center on Addiction, and now they are the Partnership to End Addiction. So they hosted the training, but a lot of the content of the training was created by the Center for Motivation and Change. They are a group of psychologists, and they have developed materials that help to help people implement craft, which we're going to talk about a little bit more. And then they've basically created or developed this approach called the Invitation to Change, which incorporates craft and other things. So that's what we're going to talk about tonight. But I wanted to kind of explain the connection as to why you're seeing slides from them. But we will be presenting this from the perspective of coaches, not as psychologists. We are not psychologists and not pretending to be one. We are parent coaches. And so the way we will be presenting this information is through our lens of how we help families. There is some information there on the front that you can see, the cmcffc.org. That is their foundation website. It is chock full of good information for families and for professionals that work with families. So I would encourage you to go check that out, cmcffc.org. If you just Google the Center for Motivation and Change in New York or the foundation, you will get to their website, and it's got a lot of good information. Okay, so this is a slide, and I left this in here. Just this is their mission. But I left it in here for a couple of reasons, because I think it's really important to understand that what they're trying to do is to bring evidence-based tools to families and loved ones and those that are struggling with substance use. And so that's really the essence of what we're going to be talking about tonight is the importance of bringing evidence-based tools to people. It's also to help to develop a sense of community. And I think probably the third bullet point here is one of the most important, which is to change the conversation about substance use from one of shame and isolation to one of compassion and engagement. And that's really one of the main goals of what this approach is to kind of stop that conversation that ultimately ends up in shame and blame and isolation of people, and becomes much more a message of compassion and empathy and engaging people in treatment.
Patty.
Yes.
Okay. I think you're sharing your screen, and it's share instead of sharing the presentation. So
Sharing this.
Because we can see like the bar up top, and we really shouldn't be able to see that.
Okay.
So can you stop sharing, and then when you go to share again, see if you can just click on the deck. And then when you launch it, it should make it full screen so that we're not seeing your screen. Does it give you that option? If not, it's not a big deal.
Let me try this one and see. Still giving you the one on the top, isn't it? Oh, but that's not good.
That's right.
Well, that's good there, but I've lost what yeah, no, I've just lost what I needed there to do. Hold on one more second.
Okay.
Let me get back here.
Nothing like somebody interrupting you as you get.
Yeah, the problem is that when I do that, let me just try one other thing.
And we don't, it's not a problem if you need to go back to that other one.
Oh, wait, no, here we go. I think I'm where I need to be. I just needed to get where I can see my notes and things and think I have done that. So, okay, so is that screen, is that right?
That's
What you're
correct.
seeing? That's correct. Okay. All right, then I think we are in good shape. So let me
Thank
keep
you.
going. And then if that doesn't work,
Yeah, it's all good.
let me know. Okay.
Okay.
Okay, so continuing on here. So the reason that we're even doing this is that we want to help to build skills for people that can help them to lead their family members to making change. And the reality is that just not very many people are getting the treatment that they need. This data from the National Survey on Drug Use and Health from 2018 shows you just how horrific those numbers are of what people are not getting treatment. They need treatment, but are not in treatment. So there's just so much work to be done. And some of the old models for families are just being shown to be not as effective as perhaps some of the new ways that we can approach interacting with our family members. And the next level of that is just the collateral damage of all the people that are impacted when somebody is struggling with a substance use disorder. So for every one person with a substance use disorder, 3 to 4 loved ones are negatively impacted. And so what do we mean by impacted, negatively impacted? We mean things like having financial problems in their home, health problems, the stress and all the health issues that can come along with that stress, work productivity, relationship conflicts. Just for point of reference, the reason that I am a parent coach is that I have a son who is in recovery and he has been sober over 10 years now. But when I look back at those years that we were struggling, that he was struggling, that we were all struggling, those were some really, really incredibly difficult times in terms of relationships between siblings, relationships between myself, my husband's, just spouse relationships, all very difficult. So decreased happiness, increased depression, all of those things are the ways that family members are negatively impacted. As well as, families go underground, they become isolated. They experience shame, they experience anger, despair. I'm sure anybody that's on here that has lived that experience can fully relate to how we tend to just, try to go underground and not be out and be visible. And so that collateral damage is pretty incredible. So the net effect is that families suffer. And then the typical recommendations for as long as I've been doing this, I remember when my son went to treatment, the very first thing when I went to the family program was go to Al-Anon, go to Al-Anon, go to Al-Anon. Certainly nothing against Al-Anon, and I did go to Al-Anon, and it was very helpful. In certain ways, it was helpful, but there were other ways and other messaging that I felt were missing. Other approaches that I felt like maybe weren't happening in that setting. And so as much as I appreciated the information that I was receiving, and to this day, I use a number of the things, I kind of refer to them as my nuggets. I use those, on a regular basis, but I also felt like there were things missing. And so, some of the messages of the detached with love and being called an enabler or being called a codependent, some of those messages were, I don't know, sometimes I just felt like there's got to be more in terms of the way that we can approach this. The classic intervention models, sending people away, encouraging people to hit rock bottom or hit their own bottom. It's the only way they'll change. Those have been the messages that we've been hearing for a long time. All of those can result in blame. Family members are being blamed for causing the problems. They're being held accountable for being the people that have to fix the problems. And in the case of people that are struggling with addiction, maybe family members are being blamed or being told that it's their fault if they don't fix it. And, there's certainly a feeling out there that if your child is struggling, maybe there's an element that you're not doing something right as a parent, and it's easy to go down that path. So shame and blame can kind of go interchangeably. The impact of that stigma is shame. Families can feel embarrassed by their loved one's problems, embarrassed by, you know, just that their loved one and some of the behaviors that are happening and the things. I mean, you know, it's a hard thing to say, but there were certainly times with my son when he was actively using that, you know, it was difficult. There were embarrassing moments. There were embarrassing times where his behavior caused embarrassment to me. And, you know, again, those are tough things, tough words to say as a parent. But you know, even families that understand that they are not responsible can still feel ashamed and embarrassed by what they are experiencing having a loved one who's using substances. But you know what? I mean, I think that what science has shown, what research has shown is that all those things are really normal. It's normal to try to be helpful when your loved one is hurting. Like that's a normal human reaction to want to help the person in your life, your child, your spouse, your family member, somebody that you love that's hurting. That's a normal behavior. To want to protect people we love from the consequences of their behavior. You know, when you have a loved one, especially if you have a child or a spouse or really anybody that you love that's using, we get a lot of bad press for trying to protect them. But I don't know anybody out there that it doesn't come naturally to protect your loved one from the consequences of their behavior. That doesn't mean that's the best thing for them, but I think it's okay to put voice to the fact that those are normal human reactions to feel that way, to be anxious, to be distrustful of others when we're being stigmatized and discriminated against by simply being in a relationship with someone using substances. It's really tough to be in that position and to not question whether somebody is going to, you know, shame you for the situation that you find yourself in. And it's normal to hope against hope that things are not as bad as they look. Those are all very normal human reactions. But so important is that family influence is a commonly cited reason for treatment and entry among help-seeking substance users. So people that are needing treatment are often go to treatment because their family's influence on them in that decision. Stigma makes them less likely to help their loved one get help and less likely to get help for themselves. So stigma is hurting us at a time when we know that family influence is one of the main things that can help lead somebody to treatment. So in summary of those, that initial part of this presentation is that substance use, obviously, anybody that's on here today probably knows just how devastating of a problem it is. Most people are not getting help. Families suffer. We suffer a lot. Most families have really no idea what to do. Families are given tools that are not what they need or that may be ineffective and perhaps are not fully meeting their needs, if meeting them at all. But then the big message out of all of that is that there are tools that can help and families can learn. And so that's today what we're going to be talking about in a little bit more depth. So I want to talk about what the invitation to change is. And this is an approach that the Center for Motivation and Change has developed. And it's a model. And it's a model for change that lay people can learn. And I think that's really important. Some of you may have seen, if not almost exactly this presentation, very similar to this presentation being presented by PhD psychologists, by clinicians. And the beauty of this approach is that it's designed for even lay people to learn and use. And so that's why we, Sabrina and I today, as parent coaches, are able to get up here and share this information, is that even as coaches, this model is something that we can take, learn, and then take back out into our communities and learn, which is a tremendous just a tremendous tool for us to be able to have. ITC, or the Invitation to Change, utilizes research-supported, evidence-based concepts and strategies. And it's basically a combination of 3 different modalities: the community reinforcement and family training, which is CRAFT. I think you've talked about that in some of these other classes if you've been participating in them, but it's a modality in and of itself. And then motivational interviewing and acceptance and commitment therapy. Those 3 things have been kind of pulled together, and aspects of each one pulled together to create this model. And it basically is saying the Invitation to Change approach takes science, it takes evidence-based information, research, and combines it with kindness to help lead people towards change. And change doesn't necessarily mean going to rehab. Change just means change. Changes in behavior, changes in approaches. I put this slide in here because I just wanted to share that we are using this model in NOMA's, Not One More Alabama's family support group. We have a family support group. We've been on an abbreviated schedule over the summer, but we meet every Wednesday evening. And each week we have a topic that's related to craft or something from the Invitation to Change model. We discuss a skill, we might practice that skill, do an exercise related to that skill, and then we have some general conversation amongst the group. So we're actually out using this on a regular basis. Week to week, we are using these tools and some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. I also wanted to share with you a couple of the resources that are out there and that we use in our family support group and that you might want to be aware of. And the first 2 that you see up here, the 20-minute guides, these are craft-based workbooks. You can access these in a couple of ways. You can go to, I believe it's 20minuteguide.com. At the end of this presentation, I'll have a slide with the information on there. But and you can actually pull those up and access the whole thing online for free. There's PDF copies of just about every page in the book, and you can just use it as an online tool. Or you can go to Amazon.com, and I think they're $15 roughly a piece, and they're softback books, and you can purchase the books. And they have 2 versions. They're essentially the same workbook, but they are, this one is geared, the language is geared towards parents, and this one is geared towards partners, which could be a spouse or really almost any other stakeholder. And it's really, they just change the way that the wording is to make it work for a different relationship. A new workbook that they have just introduced is called the Invitation to Change, and it is also a workbook, and it's got a lot of components from the 20-minute guide, but some extra additional components as well. Another resource that I think is really important for everyone on here to know about, and was really the basis for all of this, is the book Beyond Addiction, How Science and Kindness Help People Change. It was written by a group out of the Center for Motivation and Change, Jeffrey Foote, Carrie Wilkins, Nicole Kasanke. And then they have just recently, this is hot off the press, created a workbook that goes along with this book. And they also have a podcast, so they can kind of bring to life a lot of these topics. So you have a lot of really, really good resources here that can help you to take craft and Invitation to Change as a whole and take it out to either if you're somebody who has a loved one that's struggling, then these are materials that you can use, or they're also, if you're in the helping field, if you're a professional, these are all materials that you could use, refer your clients to, or even use with them in a therapeutic environment. So we're going to talk a little bit about helping. What is helping? And of course, anybody on here is probably familiar with what helping is. But what we're going to talk about today is helping in terms of being a process. It's not a set of answers, but it's a process that we're going to be going through. And the process includes understanding behaviors and motivations. So understanding, trying to figure out why is our loved one doing what they're doing, what's their motivation for that, why do they choose these behaviors. And we're also going to talk about developing a self-awareness of what's going on and our part in this process, and about self-compassion. And we're going to talk about communication in ways that can encourage change and how to create conditions for long-term positive change. The challenges for us as family members is there's a lot of challenges in helping. Anybody in here that's had a loved one that's used has probably tried to help their loved one and has probably come up against lots of roadblocks and lots of just brick walls. We want to help our loved ones. We want to see our family get better. We want to be effective, but we don't like discomfort. That can be very difficult. It can be very challenging. I know I personally struggled with the uncertainty. I wanted to be able to get answers. I wanted to fix my child. I wanted to make everything okay. I didn't want uncertainty in the situation. We are worried about risk. We're worried about bad outcomes. I was terrified when I started reading about the numbers of people that get better, who find recovery. And sometimes those numbers are pretty daunting, and they can bring about a lot of worry. At the same time, we can be having our own struggles. You know, just because your loved one is using doesn't mean life stops in all other aspects. You may be having personal financial problems. Maybe you're having problems with your job. Maybe you're having problems in relationships. So you're having your own problems at the time that you need to be helping someone else. And we have other responsibilities. We have jobs. We have elderly family members. We have other children. We have homes to maintain. You have lots of other responsibilities that also can be real challenges in helping people. So when it comes to the invitation to change, this slide is a great tool in just understanding kind of the big picture of the invitation to change. And it's divided up. Well, what I like to start off with is in the center here, it says practice, practice, practice. And that is just a theme all the way through both the 20-minute guide and the craft materials, as well as this bigger picture of invitation to change, is that everything involves practice. None of these skills, tools, concepts are things that somebody can just hear, learn once, and, oh, I got it, we're good to go, I will implement that and everything will be okay. They all involve a lot of practice. They involve studying, reading, understanding, and practicing. The way this is set up is it's divided into understanding, which is what we're going to talk about first. It's divided into awareness, which we're going to also talk about, and then it's divided into action. I'm going to kind of go through some of the understanding and awareness areas, and then Sabrina's going to jump in and focus in on the action areas. I talk fast. I'm going fast because I want to be able to get through all this information. There's a lot of good information, but I want to be, I want you to be aware that there's far more information in here than we're going to be able to really thoroughly explain tonight. So think of this as kind of an overview and introduction to this information. And I would highly encourage you to go onto that Center for Motivation and Change website. They do trainings. They offer lots of different webinars and just various things where they'll delve into some of this in much more detail than we will be able to do tonight. So the invitation to change, we kind of talked about the whole overview. We're going to break that down into helping with understanding, which is looking at behaviors make sense and one size doesn't fit all, and talking a little bit about ambivalence. Then we're going to get into helping with awareness. What can I do? What self-awareness, willingness, self-compassion. And then we're going to get into talking about some actual actions of things that people can do, how you can help. So it's all based on helping. Helping is the common thread, but you're helping through understanding what your loved one is experiencing, what they're going through, why they're making the choices that they are. You're helping by becoming aware of yourself and the part that you play in this, and you are helping with actual actions. So helping is a theme throughout the event. So we're going to start here and we're going to talk a little bit about understanding. And everybody's, seen this, something of this nature that, if you touch a hot stove, that you would not do that again, because you're going to learn that that is something that causes pain. And so you would not do that again. But that's not the way things happen in the world of substance use. What parents hear, what we hear, like when we're working with families as coaches, some of the things that they want to know is, why are they doing this? This behavior using substances is self-destructive. It's even crazy. And don't they understand how much they're hurting us? And what are they thinking? And it makes no sense. These are the kinds of things that when we're talking to families that we hear. And so what we're going to ask you to do tonight is to start looking at things using this invitation to change model through a different lens, a new perspective on these problems. So we're going to start with the behaviors make sense. And we talked about that hot stove. If using substances was like touching a hot stove, your loved one would have stopped. But behavior, even when it's destructive behavior, is motivated by reinforcement. So there's some kind of reinforcement that is happening that is making somebody repeat that behavior, making that loved one repeat that behavior. I'm about to show you a screen that was really, really, for me personally as a parent, really eye-opening, because it just kind of answered a lot for me in terms of understanding why this behavior kept taking place. So I'm going to go to this, and I am going to, it's getting into advanced Zoom webinar work for me. This little, and we're going to refer to this again in a little bit, but I wanted to show it here because I think it's really important. First of all, just FYI, this is a page out of the 20-minute guide. So this is what type of information you will start seeing. And we've pulled several pages out of the 20-minute guide throughout this presentation so that you can kind of see what types of things you would be able to use if you were using that tool to help your loved ones. But the thing that I think was really important, and we use this tool when we're working with our families, with our family support group, and it's one of the very first things in our series of programs that we talk about, is we use this chart, which is you take a behavior, if you reinforce that behavior repeats. If you take a behavior and you don't reinforce it, it stops. And what a simplistic way of understanding what your loved one, why they may be continuing to do that. So I'm going to take us to the next screen. And the next screen is, if I told you, and just think of yourself as an individual, take your loved one, or if you're a clinician, take your people that you're helping out. Just think of yourself in this. If I told you that I could help you to mellow out, feel less depressed, feel good, take away your boredom, help with your physical pain, make you excited, help you to be that life of the party, help you to socialize, make you feel a part of something, help you focus, concentrate, maybe even lose a little weight, cut your anxiety way down, make you the funniest person in the room, help you appreciate others, help you get some good sleep, help you face the day. Would that be something that was interesting to you? I think most people would probably, be intrigued at minimum to find out what it is that I, am talking about. What is this magic thing that I've got that could do all those things for you? Now put your loved one that uses substances in that place. Substance use reasons that make sense. Substance use can do all of these things. It can mellow someone out. It can help them to lessen their depression, makes them feel good. It takes away their boredom. All those things that we just listed are things that substances can do for your loved one. So when we talk about the behavior, the using substances, and we talk about reinforcement, all of these things on this screen are things that would reinforce that behavior. And they're pretty powerful. Those are some pretty powerful reinforcers. Knowing that behaviors make sense can allow a number of emotional positives. It helps parents not take that behavior as personally. when I saw that little chart and I started to understand that my son was being reinforced for those behaviors for things that I didn't have anything to do with, it helped me to not take that as personal. It's about the rewards. It wasn't about me. And it helped me to even have empathy for my child, because boy, those were some powerful reinforcements. And so I was able to have empathy. And when you empathize with your loved one, it increases your collaboration with them. It allows you to have conversations and to talk. So we're going to move on to the next one. So we've talked about understanding, we've talked about behaviors make sense. We're going to talk about the fact that not all, one size does not fit all. So that'll be the next section we're going to go in. If you think about a pair of shoes, we certainly would not expect everybody to wear the same exact size pair of shoes. And it's the same way when it comes to helping our loved one with addiction, is that one size does not fit all. But out there in the world of treatment and recovery, some of the common themes, the common ideas and reactions that people have are that addicts are all the same and that they have addictive personalities, and you are a codependent as a family member, or if he doesn't go to rehab, he'll die, or they have to hit rock bottom, or you need to go to Al-Anon. These are just some of the common ideas that are out there. And what we're going to do to try to change the way that we see that is we're going to once again try to look through this as with a different perspective. And we're going to really look at it in terms of the fact that one size does not fit all. I think it's really important to understand that human behavior is very complex. It is not one-dimensional. It is multi-dimensional, and to treat all people and their substance use as being the same really makes no sense. People enter into and leave substances throughout a lifetime for many different reasons. Those reinforcements can change over time, and it can drive people to use substances, leave that use of substances over time for lots of different reasons. A strategy that might work for one person is not necessarily going to work for somebody else. Support is much more powerful if individual circumstances are and reasons for their use are recognized. If we understand why they're using, the support that we can give could be much more powerful, and that becomes a very individualized thing. And help is just much more likely to be taken if options are provided. There's not one path to recovery. I think we've probably had those conversations a lot, but there's not one path to recovery. There's many paths to recovery, and we need to look at what individuals need for those. So the idea that one size does not fit all varies across people, provides the concept and understanding this is knowing that it provides hope in knowing that there's different ways to help our loved ones. Just because somebody's family member goes to treatment facility A doesn't mean that that facility is the right facility. Because they used medication-assisted treatment doesn't mean that that's the right thing for everybody. So recognizing the fact that everybody's needs are different and that it's worth educating yourself and learning and understanding what those different pathways are is one way that you can be very supportive and helping your loved one. It increases the flexibility in how families can be of help. If you're told that there's one way for your loved one to find their recovery and that just isn't working, then boy, what a frustrating place to be in as a family. But if you're told that, gosh, there's multiple ways, there's lots of different ways that people can find their sobriety or work towards their sobriety, then that can increase the flexibility for how you can help. It allows for options and choices, which increase the chances of collaboration or buy-in. If you go to your family member and you say, this is it, you got one way you can do this, the chances of them buying into that are pretty slim. But if you can say, look, hey, I'm not the expert in this, but there are people that are, and we can find that out, we can talk to them. You can help to show your loved one that you see them as an individual and that they have individual needs. So we talked at the beginning about practice and how important practice is, and talking with families. So I want to kind of open this up for a minute. Let's have a little interaction here. What are some options for treatment that your loved one might consider? Pop that in the chat box if you want to, and tell us what are some of the different kinds of treatment options that your loved one might want to be able to consider. What are some of those? Y'all want to pop those in? For some reason, when we made that change, I'm not seeing my chat box. Maybe that'll get me there. That's not
I'll watch it for you.
Okay. So outpatient is one. What other ones? What other ways? Participating in athletics, living in recovery housing. That's awesome. Any other ideas of other ways, any other options for treatment? CBT. So going to a therapist that might specialize in cognitive behavioral therapy, utilizing peer services, counseling services that could provide different modalities, including CBT or other modalities. So just right there, I mean, multiple different ways that your loved one might be able to address. Going to AA, going to NA, absolutely. Peer mutual support organizations have helped so many people over the years. But if your loved one is told that the only way they can get sober is to go to AA or another mutual support group, what if they're told that's the only way? Then we're really not acknowledging the fact that their needs are individual to them. That might have been a wonderful way for someone you know to get sober, but it may not be the way that this person needs, or maybe it needs to be a part of a combination of multiple things. So part of what we're trying to do is to, I'm going to go ahead and close that for now, but what we're trying to do is to, sit and put some thought to those things. What are those ways that we can make sure that we are addressing the individual needs of our loved ones? Okay, now we're going to talk a little bit about ambivalence. Ambivalence, I think this is such a great concept. And again, this is all under this third of the invitation to change model, which is helping people to understand. We need to understand that their behaviors make sense to them. They're not out there in left field making these decisions. We need to understand that one size does not fit all. And we need to understand that their ambivalence is a very, very normal part of this process. We hear things as parents in day-to-day life that, they're just not ready yet, or they lie all the time. How many times do we hear about people that struggle with substance abuse that they lie? And they very well may lie. My son lied all the time. But that's a part of the big picture. That's not, that doesn't define him. Things like he's starting to change, then he backslides, 2 steps forward, 1 step back, or 1 step forward, 2 steps back. They're in denial of their problem. If they can get away with going back to using, they will. These are all the kinds of things that when we talk to family members as parent coaches, that we hear these things all the time. I experienced them personally. And when we talk to other family members, these are things that we hear all the time. But again, with the invitation to change, we're going to ask you to let's look at this with a little different perspective. And that little different perspective is that ambivalence is normal. Webster's defines ambivalence as simultaneous and contradictory attitudes or feelings toward an object, person, or action. The best way that I think of ambivalence is that I've struggled with weight my whole life. Weight has been a big issue for me my whole life. And I can really, 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 really want to lose weight, but I can also really, really, really want to drive through Whataburger and get a big cheeseburger. I can want those both at the same time. And that is ambivalence. And it is very normal. It's a normal part of human behavior. An expected part of the process of change, which is what this is all about, is helping to find change for our loved one, is ambivalence. Remember that there were reasons why that original behavior took place. There was a reinforcement. So that there were reasons why the behavior, such as taking their substance, taking OxyContin, taking whatever it is, smoking marijuana, whatever happened, because that behavior was there that made sense to them. Ambivalence is normal. New behaviors can compete with old behaviors. They don't erase old behaviors just because we start having new behaviors. And this is where we're going to get into this concept of red lights and green lights. Ambivalence can be seen in a person's behavior and language. So at different times in their ambivalence, there may be more opportunity for us to have some really good conversations with them. But then there could be other times when they have no willingness to have those kinds of conversations. We're going to talk about this, and Sabrina's going to get into that a little bit, talking about red lights and green lights of communication. But it's the root of those red lights and green lights comes from ambivalence. So yeah, ambivalence is just a very normal part of the process. Change is a very jagged course. Change does not happen in a linear path, and old behaviors still work. They make sense. So you can have one voice that's saying, I really want to change, but then that other voice is saying, I really like what I have. Those are really tough things. When you're asking somebody to make change in terms of their substance use, you are asking for them, in many cases, to change everything that they know. You are asking them to change their social circle, how they use their time, the things that bring them comfort, and you're asking them to change everything. And so to expect them to not have some ambivalence about that is probably unrealistic. Okay, so we've talked about the understanding part. Now I'm going to go into the awareness part, and we're going to talk a little bit about self-compassion and willingness and self-awareness. So let me take a little sip of water because I'm talking a lot. If you have a question, we're going to have some time at the end for questions and answers, but if you have a question that is just really applicable to the moment, feel free to put it into the chat, and Carrie will let us know and we'll address that. So you don't, if you get tired, or if you just get tired of hearing me talk, you can feel free to jump in there and put something in, break it up. And then I'm going to go through this little part of awareness, and then Sabrina's going to jump in and get right into the meat of this, which is some really good stuff on action. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit about this issue of awareness. And again, we're going to talk about some of those common ideas that are out there. Common ideas are just that it's relentless. It is relentless. I know when my son was using, it was relentless. If I felt like if I slowed down, I would get depressed. I felt numb. My partner and I are both so irritable all the time. I can't feel anything but anger. My loved one is, such a jerk. That may not be the word you use. You may use word like, my loved one is disappointing me. My loved one makes me sad. My loved one, all these different sentiments and things. And so again, we're going to ask you to, with the invitation to change model, let's kind of look through a different lens. And instead of having those responses, let's start looking at self-awareness. Not acknowledging what is difficult and painful as you navigate through this is like driving and refusing to look at the gas gauge. If you don't take a minute to acknowledge how hard this is and how difficult it is, and look at becoming aware, self-aware of how this has impacted you, then you are probably not going to have much in the tank to be able to move forward through this process. So starting with self-awareness, staying connected with your loved one while they struggle with substances is hard. So, I can sit here all day and tell you how important it is to stay connected to your loved one. We use that all the time. We talk about that all the time. Well, you know what? Sometimes we fall short of is telling you that, you know what, you can do that, but it's really hard. It can be really hard to do that. And so being aware, having self-awareness that what you're going through is really difficult. It's really hard. Having self-awareness that one major reason for this is the amount of pain and stress you are experiencing, that it's important to acknowledge that. Just take a breath and acknowledge how difficult this is. And not acknowledging what is difficult and painful as you navigate it is like driving and refusing to not or refusing to look at that gas gauge. It's all fine until it's not fine and you just don't have anything left in your tank. So if you think there's kind of two parts to this that we're going to talk about. So part one is just noticing your feelings, your thoughts, your physical reactions, actions that you experience related to the struggle. So what are your feelings? You know, what are those feelings that you have? And we're going to do a little exercise in just a minute as a group. What are those feelings? You know, are you feeling fear? Are you feeling anger? Are you feeling confusion? Are you upset? You know, what about some of those thoughts like this cannot be happening? I was so blown away that my son would even using substances. I couldn't believe it. I'd given everything I could to raising my children, and this was still happening, and I have failed somehow. Physically, you're just exhausted. You know, the tension, you can feel it. You can feel it in your neck. You can get headaches, you can have pain. You're more susceptible to illness. And then we react by overcompensating, shutting down, pushing away, yelling. So let's kind of do a little activity with that. Let's take a moment to notice what are those things. And the purpose of this exercise is not to fix something. We're not going to fix anything right now. We're not going to fix anything at all tonight, but we are going to talk about it and we're going to acknowledge it. And we're going to say, these are the things that are hard about this process. So what I want you to do is allow yourself to acknowledge and say, what is hard for you about this process? And you can put that into the chat box and you can say, what are the things that are hard about this process? And how hard are they? Give it a number. It's just a little bothersome, or it's incredibly hard. It completely flattens me about with your loved one using. What is hard about having a loved one in your life that is using? So pop something into the chat box. Again, we're not going to fix it. We're not going to solve it. We're just going to acknowledge it. We're going to call it out and we're going to say, it's really hard for me. So
Patty, one thing that I always like to, emphasize with when I'm on calls with parents or loved ones with the families is that, the validity of their feelings, whatever it is that's going on, that it's valid, whatever it is, just to get it out there though, really has, takes kind of the power away from it.
100%, Sabrina. I mean, and I think, and Sabrina is really good at doing that with our families and our family support group, and just really encouraging people to to say what it is and to validate that you're feeling that, and it is perfectly normal to be feeling that way. So here's some of the things people are putting in. Lack of control over outcomes. Yeah, that's a very hard thing to deal with. Let me go back up here to the top of these. Let me get down here. The chaos it creates in daily life, never knowing what to expect. Absolutely, that's hard. That's really, really hard. Concerned about the possibility of them passing. Where would you put that on a number? Is that just a little bothersome, or is that completely incredibly painful? And I think we would all consider that to be, but it's a real consideration. It's a real, there's no way if you have a loved one that's using that, that's not something that is a part of what's on your mind. There's no way that it can't be. Understanding the why are they using? And yeah, that's a 10. It's so hard to deal with the feelings of helplessness. Absolutely, it's hard to feel with being helpless, because in many instances you are helpless. There's a lot of things you can do to empower yourself and to educate yourself and to learn, but there are going to be many moments that you're helpless in that situation to change them. And so finding ways that you can still do important things can be very, very helpless during that time. Being constantly afraid of the future. Absolutely. Lack of control over outcomes. It's incredibly hard and painful because my loved one only stays sober to go to work and comes home and gets drunk again. That's huge. That's very hard. The judicial system, having your loved one being part of the judicial system and dealing with that, loss and grief. distrust, concerned about their associates coming to harm them. The rest of the family will freak out. Yeah, I mean, these are huge. All of these really valid things that are hard. So we'll keep moving forward, but just putting voice to them, just validating them, like Sabrina said, is a big part of that self-awareness.
Patty, one question.
Yeah.
Someone was inquiring about the slides. I'm assuming you can't share these, or could you?
I cannot share these because they're not originally my slides.
Okay.
So I won't be able to share them, and I apologize for that. However, what I will tell you is that almost all this information is in those resources that I earlier shared, and I'm going to reshare them at the end and on the website. Just about a lot of this information is, maybe it looks a little different, but it's all on there. It's all out there.
Thank you.
I apologize for that.
No problem.
And if they were my slides, I would 100% share them, but I'm not in a position to share theirs. Okay, so well, we'll just talk real quick. You know, what was it like to allow yourself the room to write down those difficulties? Does it give you any relief, or did it just feel like a waste of time? Does it make you feel guilty? You know, just bringing about that self-awareness is really important. And then the second part of self-awareness is really identifying what matters to you. And I can't speak for others, but when my son was using, I completely lost sense of what was important to me, what were my values. And so incorporating that back in and bringing that into the self-awareness of what things are important to you, what are your values? You know, here's examples. Maybe for somebody, their values would include connection, kindness, patience, reliability, safety, love, dedication. On my list, I would probably add honesty, transparency, humility, gratefulness. Those are all things that to me are very important, and very easy to lose when you have a loved one that's using substances. Noticing those things, writing them down, and trying to keep those as you think about your self-awareness, keeping those things in the forefront. By becoming aware of what you're experiencing, including the painful parts, you have a chance to notice and take care of yourself while staying connected to what matters most to you. So it's important to remember that you need to stay connected to what matters most to you. You're not helping your loved one if you lose your sense of values in your life. This awareness will help you to be proactive and strategic in how you offer help to your loved one, instead of just simply reacting in the moment or to the pain. Reactiveness is probably where most of us go. I said this to many groups when I've talked to them, that, you know, my son would come in that back door from school, and I would have, maybe I'd had a call that day from the principal, or maybe I had you know, found something in his room, or somehow become aware of something that morning when he left, I didn't know. And the minute he walked in that back door, I was reactive. I was pouncing. I was jumping on whatever that thing was. In that process, never did I stop to look at my own self-awareness in that. How does that fit into it? In my response to him, am I staying connected to my own values? And if you can be more aware of that, then it allows you to be strategic instead of reactive. What if I'd been able to take a moment and think through what was happening and strategize a proper response instead of just reacting? Probably would have had a much better outcome. If I can prioritize what's really important, if I can plan ahead, those are all really important things. Helping with awareness is understanding willingness, and the willingness is the willingness that you have to make change, to bring about change. Common ideas are, I'm at a breaking point. I just can't do this anymore. It's too painful to go through all of this. We have to put a stop to this once and for all. Maybe tough love is what's needed. And I miss my kid that used to be. What happened to them? All of these are things that can put up roadblocks in terms of your willingness to help your loved one. And what, again, we're going to ask you to do is to look through it from a new perspective as part of the invitation to change model. And they look at it from the side of two sides of a coin. One side of the coin is what matters to me in my relationship with my loved one. What are those values that are important to me with my loved one? And then what are those uncomfortable, painful feelings that are happening during this struggle? And the reality is you can't have one side of a coin without the other side of the coin. Staying connected and helping your loved one struggle while they're struggling, staying connected to and helping your struggling loved one will be painful and uncomfortable at times because it matters. Working to remain open and flexible, bending, not breaking, is challenging when dealing with change, uncertainty. So willingness, choosing, and that word is really important, choosing to accept that what is happening, and then inviting in and allowing that to be true, that this is happening right now. And this choice offers us a chance to keep working towards what we truly care about. It's human nature to want to avoid pain or make it stop. So again, if we think about that coin, that we have values, we have things that are important to us, our relationship with our loved one is important, but it rarely, when they're using substances, comes without difficulty, without pain. We often attempt to control that pain by controlling that other person. We want to control the things that they do. We want to control who they spend time with, how they behave, how they act. And then we want to control ourselves by, shutting down. We control our own behaviors by just shutting down, and we put that coin down. And the willingness that we talk about here is willingness to pick up that coin with both sides of it and help use that coin to help us stay connected to that loved one, but let us also stay connected to the things that we value. And willingness changes meaningless suffering into meaningful suffering. So you can't always get rid of the suffering. People come to us as parent coaches and they want us to figure out how to take away the pain. And you can't always take away the pain, but what you can do is sometimes help to minimize meaningless pain, meaningless suffering, and turn it into meaningful suffering, meaningful pain, where you're moving in maybe a positive direction towards change. Okay, I'm going to keep moving because I want to get us to the next section. Okay, and the last thing that I'm going to talk about here is just a little bit about self-compassion. You've probably all heard about self-care, and self-care is so critically important. If you don't have anything left in your tank, you're not going to have anything to give those people that you love. But what happens, the reality is that we put our loved one first. My child, my loved one, my spouse comes first. I'll take care of myself later. Once they get into treatment, I'll focus on me. I don't even want to see my friends anymore. I can't control myself. I keep crying. I just feel weak all the time. I can't imagine what other people think. Those are all common ideas and reactions. And again, we want you to start thinking about that differently. And we want you to think about those things with an eye towards self-compassion. Self-compassion is not encouragement to just pamper yourself and to do pampering things or to just forget everything. What it does is that it's encouragement to acknowledge that you are part of this and your experience is part of this. And including yourself with kindness allows you to acknowledge that stress, deal with it more effectively, understand what those toxic reactions are and that they can result in shame. Notice that non-compassionate reactions can result in isolation, and making space for self-kindness in your world. Self-compassion can be divided into 3 areas. They call them the 3 Ps. Being patient. So being patient with yourself, supportive of yourself, be gentle on yourself, caring for yourself, being part of the process, perspective that allows the idea that all people make mistakes, suffer and experience hardship in life, and being present, being aware that you have painful thoughts and emotions, and that those are all 3. So self-compassion comes from being patient, being part of the experience, part of common humanity instead of isolating, and being present, mindful in the situation. Practicing self-compassion helps you find willingness to pursue deeper values. It allows you to share with your loved one. It allows you to create an internal voice of kindness. So it's just a really, really important aspect. All right, so time is of the essence. We're going to move through this, and we are going to get to this last section on actions. Actions are some hands-on things that you can do to help your loved one, and helping them is really the root of what we're trying to do. So Sabrina's going to jump in and talk about communication tools and some behaviors that you can do. It's going to talk a little bit about the red light and the green light, so that we can get away from some of those common ideas and reactions and look through a different perspective and get to the point of being able to help our loved ones. So Sabrina, I'm going to turn this over to you, let you kind of get in and talk a little bit about communication and this part.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Patty. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. The red lights and green lights is crucial when it comes to, communicating with our loved ones. Noticing, it's all about noticing when is a good time to have a conversation and when is it not a good time to have a conversation. Acknowledging both their feelings in a situation and our feelings in a situation, because we may be, as family members, we may want to have a conversation with our loved one, but if we are too heated or we are, feeling very negative, that may be not a good time for us to have that engage in a conversation. So just noticing those red lights and green lights, help us have, engage and encourage positive behavior, both in ourselves and our loved ones. And it helps shift some ambivalence and open those doors, to having, conversations about treatment or about behaviors. Paying attention, to those lights. This is our workbook pages, and just kind of goes over that it starts. Sorry.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. Just some examples on the screen. If you'd like to talk to your child about, or to your loved one about not drinking at a party all night, how do you go about having that conversation? And, it becomes crucial to know, it brings in all of those things that, Patty's been talking about so far, where you're very self-aware of what your feelings are in a situation, and what identifying whether your loved one is ready to have a conversation, starting to ask them permission, ask a question. Don't just come out and accuse somebody of doing something. It can bring on defensiveness. We want to ask them questions. We want to inquire about things. We want to get their perspective. Green light questions say, okay, but can we not have a fight about it? That would be a common one that our loved ones might say, because they don't want to fight about it. We always fight about, what substance use. We're always talking about the substance, instead of talking about the actual behaviors or ourselves. Can you tell me what I think? Can I tell you what I think? Is a great opener for families to use when they want to have a conversation about any one of the behaviors that they don't want to see in their loved one anymore. You can go ahead, Patty.
Okay.
So it leads into the 7 elements of positive communication, which is so vital. And I think the important part I want to call out here is that these are not just things that we can put into action with our loved ones, but they're things we can put into action with everybody in our life, anybody that we encounter. All relationships, I believe, can be strengthened if we are to communicate in these ways using these tools. So number 1 is to be brief. Kind of get to the point. Say kind of what you want to say, and don't do too much repeating. Be very specific in your requests. Make sure that you can kind of script things ahead of time if you want to. You want to be positive. You want to steer away from saying negative things. You want to, because you want them to engage in this conversation. You want to label your feelings as in I statements. I think we've all heard that, making I statements as opposed to you make me feel this way, and you do this, and when you do this, saying I feel happy when you blank, or I feel sad when you blank. That kind of, is I feel terrified when you go out and you drink and drive. Those label your feelings without putting them on a defensive. Offering an understanding statement. That is about letting them know that you understand what they're trying to say. When they're giving you feedback, hearing them, you understand them. How do you let them know you're understanding them? You can give a reflective statement that you kind of repeating what they've said, so that they know that you heard them the way that they need to be heard. Taking partial responsibility, which is always very good because we are part of this process. We share in the problem. I'm not saying that we are the problem, but we are part of the solution. So, and then offering help. We can always offer help if it's needed, if it's wanted. They don't always want our help. So asking, would you like some help brainstorming different ideas for treatment? Would you like, my help coming up with an alternative to drinking and driving? Would you like or just offering the solution of, would you like an alternative to, drinking and driving? I could come and pick you up if you drank too much. Those kind of things, just you offering to help, and then being ready for if they don't always want our feedback and our help, being okay with that. That's also part of this process as well. Okay, Patty. So these are just some work book pages that we have from the 20-minute guide that kind of go over, just how to, it just gives some examples of what we might, a request we might want, and how to say it, the way we would normally say it, and then trying to put more of a positive spin on it. These are things we go over in our family support group on a regular basis, because we can talk about the tools, but we never want to leave family members without actionable items that they can actually take back with them. So it becomes a very powerful tool, to practice these communication. techniques. Oh,
Did you want that one back up, Sabrina?
no, that's good. That's
Okay. So, you know, go ahead.
Go
Is
ahead.
that-
No.
Sorry. We're trying to do this in a way that makes sense. Do you have more you want to add to any of those action?
I just, one thing that it really, the beginning of the slides and everything that you covered, the behaviors making sense and the self-awareness, really lead themselves into empathy and gaining some empathy for, and the empathy is where we start to change our behaviors and how we decide that we want to carry forward with our loved ones. And so as a parent coach, when I'm talking to families, I want them to identify what their main goal is. And I think it's important for them to do that because, usually our goal is not to alienate, our goal is not for isolation of ourselves and our loved one. It is really reconnection, because ultimately we have lost connection with ourselves and we've lost, an impactful connection with our loved one. And that's what we're hoping to gain back, is usually what I've found in my experience. So, and then putting into action these communication tools, the 7 elements of positive communication, and being able to maybe journal through what our feelings are so that we can change our reactions to responses, so we can have that positive change with our loved one and be there and be ready for when they are ready to come to us and ask for help. That's the main thing, is I think just being able to open up that line of communication, that relationship again, so that when they're ready, they have a place to go, a safe place to go, so that they can start exploring with you what their options are. So that's
excellent, Sabrina. I appreciate that. And I agree wholeheartedly. I think Sabrina has done a lot of coaching. She's worked with a lot of families, and very, powerful words, because the whole idea in the invitation to change is to help us to understand, to have awareness, and then to be able to use those and put that into actions that can help us to bring about change in our loved one. Sabrina went through a couple of things that are some of the action tools that we have. If you do choose to go through and look at some of these tools online, like the 20-minute guide or the invitation to change workbook or anything like that, you're going to find a lot more tools too. Some of my favorite in there is parent collaboration. There's a whole section on how to help parents get on the same page. There's natural consequences, positive reinforcement. There's all sorts of tools that are that come with exercises and activities that would all fit into this area of action. So really, really powerful materials out there. It all goes back to this chart. If there's a behavior and it's reinforced, the behavior will repeat. If the behavior is not reinforced, it will stop. And so our goal is to figure out how we as family members can help to minimize the reinforcement of those behaviors, so that they can either slow or change or ultimately stop. All right, let's see. Let me just get to here. So behavior tools, just like we were talking about in that action area, we want to grow the positive and we want to reduce the negative. And that's the goal in the invitation to change, is grow or strengthen or support what we want. And that's positive reinforcement, and limit what we don't want, which is letting things like natural consequences take place, putting in place boundaries, having limit setting, knowing what the edges of our willingness are. What are we willing to let happen? What are we not? And also being willing to step away when we need to step away. Catch them being good, being able to show positive reinforcement for the things that they are doing good, learning how to look for those things it is a really powerful part of creating positive reinforcements. And then dealing with negative behaviors through allowing those natural consequences, setting limits, stepping away. If something's just really hard, perhaps you need to step away from them. I'm going to roll through this because I want us to get to very end here, so you have a minute to ask questions. So bottom line, with all the things that we've talked about tonight, and again, I said at the beginning, this is really just a touch on all of this. You can tell that I've skipped through a number of slides, and there's a lot of really good, powerful information in those slides, but there's this is a presentation that could easily be a 3 or 4 hour presentation, and we've tried to just kind of hit the highlights in a way that would give you a concept of what the invitation to change model is about, but it's certainly not meant to be an all-inclusive overview of that. And so I encourage you to take some time and go and learn and do some additional trainings in the area with the people that developed it and learn even more about this model. Okay, the bottom line for everything that they will be teaching with Invitation to Change is simply that you must continue to practice all the tools, all the skills, all of the concepts, and that is the path to change, and that we have to recognize that behavior is complex, that change comes by addition, not subtraction. Practice is the process of change. By adding, we keep adding to our tools by practicing them. Adding things can be awkward when we try things new. You know, just some of these communication tools, they can be really awkward at first, and that we might really not be very good at them, and we might stumble around through them. But if we keep practicing and if we keep learning, we will be able to get better at them and hopefully be able to help create change in our loved one. Okay, couple of wrap up things here. Again, I mentioned this at the beginning, but there is a really, really good workbook that will go through in much more detail some of the information that we've gone over tonight. If you go to invitationtochange.com, invitationtochange.com right there, you can access that workbook. Also, the craft workbooks, the 20-minute guide, you can access at the 20minuteguide.com. The CMC Foundation for Change has, they're all over social media. They've got emails you can subscribe to. They'll send you lots of good information. So I encourage you to do that. And again, I don't work for the Center for Motivation and Change. We are with Not One More Alabama. We are bringing this to you tonight as parent coaches who have been trained through the Center for Motivation and Change. Our website is notonemorealabama.org. That's our email, phone number. And tonight it was myself and Sabrina that have been presenting. So we have 3 minutes. 3 long minutes for questions. I'm sorry, a lot of information, and I'm sure we'll be told that we said way too much and didn't leave time, but you can always email us with questions and we're happy to answer those. But if you've got questions, or Carrie, if anybody's put
yes, and Beverly is asking for the resources and links, and yes, we will. We'll send out a follow-up email to everybody that was registered for this webinar, and we will include all of the information that Patty just shared with us, as well as a copy of this video. So if you want to go back through it, because wow, that was some amazing information. Thank you, ladies, so very much. I know, being a parent myself, from struggling with this and working with other parents, this model can be challenging, but can also be so powerful. It's almost like we have to unlearn some things, I think. from what we used to believe and trying to control our children to this approach, and but is so it has been so powerful in the lives of, in my marriage and in learning to work with our sons, pre-sobriety, and now even in sobriety, continuing to practice what I've learned through this model has been so powerful. So I'm so grateful for it. And I'm rambling. So any questions before we finish? We have 1 minute.
One long minute. Now, we're always available. If anybody ever wants to just email us, we are far from experts, but we have used this a lot, and we use it every Wednesday in our family support group. And so we probably have a little more understanding than some people, but we have some really good people we have access to. So any questions we can't answer, we can get an answer. And so feel free to just email us if there's just something that we talked about tonight. I know I really just touched on some highlights and didn't go through everything. So if there's something out there that you just kind of want to have a deeper conversation, Sabrina is incredibly gifted at coaching and working with families, and it also is a tremendous resource, and myself. So feel free, just reach out, and we're happy to help any way we can.
All right. Thank you so much, ladies. And again, we will follow up with an email. It will take a few days. It might actually be early next week, because we'll get the video and clean it up just a little bit before we send it out. And we appreciate you. And Patty, enjoy the beach.
Will do.
Thank you for taking out time from your vacation to share with us. We appreciate all of you for joining us again, and we'll hope to see you again soon. Have a good night.
Thank you, Carrie. Appreciate it. Thank you.